All right, it's bedtime. Let's get you all snuggled in here. Okay, all right. You already had your glass of water. I'm not going to get you another one. And now it's time for your bedtime story. So tonight we're going to be reading The Princess and the Pea. Once upon a time there lived a handsome prince. He had loving parents, plenty of friends, and lived a wonderful life in his castle. But one thing always made him sad. He did not have a wife. The prince had always wanted to marry a princess, but he wanted her to be clever and funny and loving and kind. None of the princesses that he met at parties and balls were quite right. Some of the princesses were too mean. Some were too rude. Some were too quiet. Some were too loud. And some were just plain boring. So the prince decided to travel the world in the hope of finding a perfect princess. He met many more princesses who tried to impress him with their beauty, their dancing, and their baking. But still none was quite right. I am never going to meet the girl of my dreams, he sighed to himself. Cheer up, son, said the king. You're still young. One day you'll meet a wonderful girl, just like I met your mother. Several months later, when even the king and queen had begun to give up hope of their son ever finding a bride, there was a terrible storm. Suddenly there was a loud knock on the castle door. I wonder who could be out on such a terrible stormy night, said the prince. When he opened the door, a pretty young girl stared back at him. She was soaked from head to toe. May I come in for a moment? She pleaded. I was traveling to see some friends, but I got lost in the storm and now I am very cold and wet. You poor thing, said the queen. You must stay the night. You cannot travel on in this weather. The prince smiled at the girl. What is your name? I'm Princess Penelope, she replied. You are all very kind. I don't want to be a bother to you. At the word princess, the queen smiled to herself. She took the girl's hand and said, Of course not. Let's get you warm and dry. Later, the prince listened contentedly as the charming princess chatted away over supper. She was clever and funny and loving and kind. By the end of the evening, he'd fallen in love. The queen was delighted when she saw what was happening, but she wanted to be quite sure that Penelope was a real princess. She went to the guest room in the castle and placed a tiny pea under the mattress. Then she told the servants to pile 20 more mattresses onto the bed and then 20 feather quilts on top of the 20 mattresses. The queen showed the princess to her room. Sleep well, my dear, she said. In the morning, the queen asked Penelope how she'd slept. Penelope didn't want to be rude, but she couldn't lie. I'm afraid I hardly slept a wink, she replied. I'm so sorry, replied the queen. Was the bed not comfortable? There were so many lovely mattresses and quilts, it should have been very comfortable, replied the princess. But I could feel something lumpy, and now I'm black and blue all over. The queen grinned and hugged the girl to her. Oh, that proves it, she cried. Only a real princess would be able to feel a tiny pea through 20 mattresses and 20 feather quilts. The prince was filled with joy. He had finally met the princess of his dreams. Not long after that, the prince asked Princess Penelope to be his wife. They married, and the prince was never unhappy again. As for the pea, it was put in the Royal Museum as proof that perfect princesses do exist. All right, that's the end of the story. Now it's time for lights out. So go to bed. You got a big day tomorrow, and I know you're going to have a good one. I love you. Night-night.